Welcome back. Today's talk is titled Why We Say No When Life Says Yes. So, we talked about how being judged for being your authentic self can lead to this fear of being seen. But how does it show up when we're adults? Well, it goes under such names as procrastination, perfectionism, this it's not ready yet. But being seen doesn't have to be some large scale project or big public talk. It can be as simple as allowing yourself to be vulnerable in front of another person, trying something new, or doing something that you don't feel comfortable with yet. Sometimes procrastination is just the adult way of hiding from this fear of being seen. There's an old joke, and it goes, procrastination is like masturbation. It feels good at first, but in the end, you're just screwing yourself. Crude? Maybe, but it's accurate. Because delay can help us feel safe in the moment. It feels like control. It feels like it's protecting us from embarrassment, judgment, or rejection. But eventually, the thing protecting you from exposure becomes the very thing keeping you from your life. So the real question is not, why am I so lazy? The question is, what part of me is trying not to be seen yet? I was listening to an interview with Tom Brady, and he was talking about practice squad guys. And he was saying that in the confines of practice, some of these guys looked like perennial all-stars. They had sticky fingers, amazing coverage skills. They had the playbook memorized by heart. And he'd go up to the coach and say, we need to get these guys in a game ASAP. But when the time came and their number was called, they looked like a completely different person. As they said, the lights were too bright. And he said some of the guys just seemed like they were happier being practice squad guys. They were still hyper competitive. They still loved playing. But being on the practice squad meant they were still in the NFL. They're still close to the dream, but they didn't have to carry the full pressure of the lights, the crowd, and the expectations that came with it. And you see this online all the time now. People posting inspirational quotes, motivational clips, spiritual wisdom, philosophical one-liners. And look, I'm not saying that's bad. I'm guilty. I've done it too. Sometimes we post a thing because we're trying to remind ourselves of the thing. But there's a version of this where posting becomes a substitution for movement. It feels like growth because we are speaking the language of growth. It can feel like courage because we're performing it publicly. It can even feel like an identity because we're telling the internet, look, this is who I am. But it's still controlled, safe, curated. We still get to choose the quote. We still get to choose the angle. We still get to choose the version of ourselves that we're letting people see. I think we all know someone like this. I follow a guy that posts inspirational stuff constantly. He has been doing so for as long as I've known him. Wisdom, philosophy, and motivation all day, every day. And from where I'm at, it really looks like he's constantly just trying to psych himself up into a life that he hasn't stepped into yet. He's always talking about the dream, always posting about the dream, but not necessarily moving towards the dream. And again, no judgment. I am saying this because I recognize the exact same pattern in myself. I've been there. I've used the words to feel close to the action. I have talked about courage while sitting there avoiding the very thing that requires courage. How long did I put off just the act of recording this? I've talked about surrender while still trying to control the outcome. So the question is not, are inspirational posts bad? The question is, are they an expression of something you're living, or are they a beautiful little hiding place? Because there's a big difference between posting about the mountain and actually taking a step up onto it. And I think that happens in ordinary life too. Years ago, I met a guy named Sean while I was playing pickleball. And on a break, we're all standing around talking, and Sean's telling anyone who will listen that his dream is to go to Japan. His friends even chimed in, oh yeah, but Sean always talks about Japan. We hope he goes one day. And then he mentioned that he was laid off from a big tech company. And I was like, great, this is your opportunity. You should go. Japan's awesome. Love it. And he starts kind of nervously laughing. Oh, I can't go. I'm going to be starting a new business. It's not the right time. And seeing the pushback, I was like, fine, okay, don't go. But you could tell something inside had struck a chord. Because after it was all over, he messaged our mutual friend and asked if he could come hang out, which is not something he'd ever done before. And my friend was actually quite shocked. So sure enough, he came over a few hours later, and we got to immediately talking about Asia. He started asking all sorts of questions about the flight, what it's like. And I explained that he'd love it. It's a great time there. There's no time like the present to go fulfill his dream. And then he started blaming his wife. Oh, I've got a kid. I got a wife. She won't let me go. She's so scared. And at last I was like, fine, okay, don't go. Like, what do you want me to do? I'm not going to force you into your dream. And somehow along the way, he decided the best solution was to call his wife and put me on the phone with her. So now I'm talking to this guy who I've met once. I'm talking to his wife. And sure enough, she was scared. Of course, nobody wants their husband to go off to a foreign country and leave them with a kid. But one by one, we went over all of her fears. I explained that Japan is very safe. It's got great technology. They can talk every night, video chat. And if he doesn't do it now, when is he going to do it? You only get one shot sometimes at that dream. And I'll give her credit. She was a supportive wife. And eventually she agreed. She's like, you know what? If it's his dream, he can go. So I turned to him and I said, guess what, buddy? You get to go. And you should have seen it. His eyes became like saucers. It's like a deer in headlights. And suddenly he starts stammering. He's like, well, I mean, it's hurricane season. I couldn't possibly leave my wife. And the flight's so long. And it was funny because the dream was on the phone. It was calling him and he was refusing to answer. And I think the underlying fear is really quite simple. As long as the dream was impossible, he got to keep wanting it, to keep thirsting, to keep questing. He was Sean, who would go to Japan one day. He'd created his own carrot on a stick. But once life said yes, the fantasy had to become a decision. Now he couldn't hide behind the obstacle anymore. And that is part of the fear of being seen. Because sometimes being seen is not a sold out crowd in a stadium watching you have your moment. Sometimes being seen happens in ordinary moments when life says, okay, you wanted it, here it is. And in that moment, the real question is not whether you still want the dream. The real question is whether you're willing to become the kind of person who can actually receive it. So with that said, be kind to yourself, and I'll talk to you again soon.